Vuyisa is the founding partner at Entrepreneur Traction. He actually is a television host on Business Beat on Cape Town TV and a columnist for the Business Report. Vuyisa is a lean startup trainer, and he's a small business advisor, and he travels around the world, and I know he's going to introduce himself, but great guy, and Scott always says, this is our future president. So just up to the stage, welcome Vu. Thank you, Vu.
Kevin, the value of the wealth ecoin would have to be quite significant for me to be convinced to become president at this stage. One thing that Kevin forgot to mention is that I'm also a co-founder at South Africa's first equity crowdfunding platform called Uprise Africa. But good morning, Cape Town. My family actually lives in Cape Town, but I mostly spend my time outside of the city, so I only pay rates and taxes here. And effectively, I've ended up becoming simply an economic migrant here. So I'm a refugee in economic terms. But is everybody good? You guys have been quiet the whole morning. I've been sitting in the corner there just watching the mood. Are you scared of this? What's going on? Scott, what do you guys put in the memo for these guys? They're all like very somber. I mean, it's time to get excited. So hopefully I'll do something to help not only lighten the mood, but also really get everybody excited about the prospect of where the future of finance is going, not only in South Africa, but globally as well. So, as been introduced, my name is Vuyisa Qabaka, and in my normal kind of daily life, I have the very enviable opportunity to work with some of the most inspired people. And I get to work with entrepreneurs, both South Africans throughout Africa and some in Europe as well, as I speak now. So I'm quite lucky and very grateful to be here today. Pretty much this conversation with Scott started sometime in August last year. We were supposed to do the roadshow around October, but here we are now, sort of late March 2018. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here, and we've had a great time so far in Joburg, coming back to Cape Town. And again, I don't think I've spoken in Cape Town in a while, so it's quite good to be in Cape Town. So just to, being in South Africa, I know one of the things that's important, you see a black guy in the front of the stage. Okay, maybe he knows something. I wanted to share a little bit about myself, just to say I do know a little bit more, because there's a lot of silver foxes here in front of me. So I just want to make them comfortable, at least know. I look younger. I am older than I look, maybe I should say. Specifically in the tech and ICT space here in Cape Town, I was part of the team that worked on the Bandwidth Barn, which is a tech hub here in Cape Town, specifically part of the Cape IT initiative. I've been in tech for the last 7 years. I've worked in real estate. In fact, that's where I met Scott around 14 years ago. I was a high-rolling sales and real estate broker, and doing very well here in Cape Town, selling on average about 9 to 16 properties. You can Google it. It's on the internet, so you can believe it. And I've also spent some time a little bit in the hospitality and tourism space, where I had opportunities as a young student when I left university to invest in some businesses. So I know a little something about something. I also I do some angel investment deals, and I do a lot of early stage startup mentorship. So I'm having a really great time. But in general, I've contributed as well to the broadening of the tech ecosystem in South Africa. I'm one of the founding trustees of an advocacy group called Vuyisa, which is still running. I'm no longer directly involved, but we're all still friends. There's nothing wrong that went wrong there. I'm a contributor to multiple kind of media platforms, Venture Burn, Disrupt Africa, some kind of local research papers that kind of come out. So I've played my bit in contributing to the advancement and development of the tech ecosystem locally. Of late, I've become more kind of involved more globally, and I'm part of the SeedStars World Network, which is run out of Switzerland. Part of the Global Angels Network, as well as a global entrepreneur movement, which is based out of Malaysia. So, I have a little bit of fun kind of going around the world, discovering that there are other crazy people like me, which is kind of fun. I don't feel too weird that as a 30-something black guy in South Africa that I'm left alone. So it's okay. So let's get into it. I've been asked to specifically speak around the future of finance. And to me, just to answer the question right away, and before I start unpacking some of my theory of change principles around this particular topic, I just want to tell you guys that, quite simply put, the future of finance is going to be mobile. Okay? In fact, I've been taking entrepreneurs on roadshows to Europe, to Israel since 2012. And one thing that I learned that Africa has an advantage over most developed countries is that we are building solutions that are mobile first. And some of these things are only now becoming more evident and more apparent for everybody else. Okay? So if you didn't know it before today, now you know that the future of finance is pretty much going to sit on your phone. You're going to be able to do everything there. And what Wealth Migrate is doing with property is also just equally a massive game changer. And again, you're going to see some of the stats I'm going to share with you in terms of why I'm personally excited about it and personally involved in investing on the platform as well. The future of finance is going to be global. Okay, so again, when I do projects with partners, I also work in multiple time zones, and you can imagine, for the first time in 2017, I even went as far as South America, so I've pretty much covered everything except for Australia, thank God. Okay? So the only continent I haven't quite worked out is Australia, and again, maybe it's a blessing, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But the main thing to also realize that the future of finance is going to be about trust. I think Scott mentioned a little bit of this. David touched on it a bit. So certainly it's something that we all need to trust. So all these platforms, these decentralized platforms, fundamentally at their core need everybody that's involved in them to trust them. Okay? So again, that's a general outlook of where the future of finance primarily looks like. But today, what I'm going to really focus on is an area which is called alternative finance. It's becoming a new basket of investment opportunities that, again, is really changing the world of finance in the world. Okay? And the way I'm going to do that is to briefly unpack to you three of the main drivers in this particular space. Starting with peer-to-peer. How many of you, in South Africa, we've been quite at the forefront of peer-to-peer lending. How many of you have been involved in some kind of peer-to-peer platform of recent times? Only one? Okay. Joburg, there were more, two. And hopefully your experience was good. What sort of returns were you getting from those peer-to-peer platforms? 20%, 25%? Usually it's kind of the benchmark. I'm going to touch a little bit on initial coin offerings, as Scott mentioned earlier, for those of you who were in the room at the time, the ICOs. But I'm really going to focus a lot of my attention more on equity crowdfunding, which is something that we've done here in South Africa through Uprise Africa. So in terms of the peer-to-peer space, the proposal is quite simple. You've got a bunch of early-stage or late-stage companies seeking capital. They make that opportunity available to a number of potential investors who potentially are providing loan assistance through the platform, and the platform basically connects them, and on the back of that, returns are made out of the interest earned from that basic loan. The rules are simple both for the lender as well as the person lending the money from the investment portfolio. Now in South Africa, again, like the ICOs, there are instances where some of these deals have been on the border of fraudulency, because ultimately some of the invoices could be faked, et cetera, et cetera. But at its core, the basic principles of peer-to-peer is that you need a serviceable need for an invoice that needs to be paid or some kind of contract that needs to be serviced. You offer that opportunity to a network of investors on a platform to assist, and they find the opportunity that way. In terms of ICOs, and I'm going to go through the slide because there's a video going around on social media now that focuses on this, so I thought I would add this particular graph to the slide. But in effect, the initial coin offering, ultimately, at its basicest level, is no different to an initial public offering. Okay? Most of you will have some kind of annuity income coming from your pension fund, or you're a direct investor in shares and equities in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Thankfully now, South Africa has demonopolized that space, and now you're going to have 3 new exchanges coming out in South Africa during the course of the year. 2 of them have already started. There's another one that's going to start marketing directly to the public. So in effect, we are taking away the JSE's 40-year monopoly in the share space and providing a unique opportunity for people to participate, the general public. But they're coming at it. It's kind of come a little bit too little too late, but I think still people will have the comfort, especially because of trust, will have the comfort that a regulated platform is able to receive the investment through what is effectively an initial public offering. An initial coin offering works on the very same principles, okay? So a lot of companies like Wealth Migrate has done now basically effectively take what is a decentralized platform, which is the blockchain, and they build very much a centralized investment opportunity on top of it, okay? We can go, well, in this afternoon, they'll talk a little bit more about how their Wealth eCoin is going to work in terms of what type of token opportunity it offers, either a security or a utility coin, but they'll go into the details of that this afternoon. But effectively, the space around which the whole kind of Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency space is being developed right now, if you look specifically at the United States, depending on whose stats you looked at, but it's currently at a relatively kind of early stage of adoption, ranging between 1% to 4%, depending on whose stats you follow. And again, if you track that on the graph, you can see that compared to innovations and technologies from as far back as the 1900s, that's currently where the crypto industry is right now. So we're very much early in this process. So the one thing, and I got this question in Johannesburg already, the one thing I would obviously encourage people to do is educate yourself and build your own knowledge at your own level. You know, I've noticed of late that in South Africa, everybody is now becoming a crypto specialist and an expert, okay? Now again, there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a free country. And again, you get judged by a network of peers who you share that knowledge with. But I think as a grown-up and as a person seeking knowledge, we do live in the knowledge economy. So all the information is available at your fingertips for you to find out and better inform yourself around how these things work, okay? We can try, and I'm happy to take questions again later on during the panel this afternoon. We can try and unpack some of these principles, but fundamentally the bottom line is that the main decision on whether or not to participate and to get involved is something that you want to do. Also quite interesting that so far in 2018, the ICO space has raised somewhere in the region of $1 billion already. And in 2017, $5.6 billion was raised by ICOs, okay? And about 48% of 902 total ICOs that raised capital last year were successful, 48%, okay? And again, I'll share some of the equity crowdfunding stats which track very similar kind of figures in terms of the space. But the little stat that you see there before I move on is that the total global population in the next 10 years, 20% of the globe is going to be in some shape or form involved in fintech. Again, referring back to my initial slide, it's going to be because of the cell phone, okay? Because it's going to touch base on everybody. So again, depending on how you look at this, you're either going to get involved or you're going to put your head in the sand. But again, I guess by being in the room today, you already kind of are semi-halfway to a decision. So hopefully, after today, you kind of crank up that effort and make it happen. Because really, the honest truth is that in the next 10 years, it's going to be hard to ignore any level of fintech that's currently coming out at the moment. But the one thing that I want to talk about, and again, I want to do this through a little bit of a story that I want to share, is the space that we specifically are interested in called equity crowdfunding. And ultimately, what we currently are seeing and what we're tracking is that of global funds raised in crowdfunding in general, 14% and growing is out of equity crowdfunding, okay? And when we looked around, equity crowdfunding as an investment class has been around since effectively 2010. When I started asking questions and we started kind of inquiring Why is it that South Africa doesn't have an actual equity crowdfunding platform? No one could tell us why. Okay, so over the past 2 years, we've gone out to go and make an effort, not only to figure the legislative and the legal frameworks out, but also to build a platform. And now we have a platform called Uprise Africa, and I'll talk about that a little bit more during the course of the slide. But most South Africans would have been exposed to crowdfunding in general about 6 or 7 years ago through platforms like Thunder Fund, Candy Stick, Adabit. There's multiple platforms that are offering either rewards-based or donations-based crowdfunding, okay? This is something that's currently new specifically for South Africa, but really not new to the rest of the world. It's been around for the last 8 years. So we have the opportunity, again, typical of Africans, to leapfrog and drive innovation for the next generation of where the current industry currently sits. And I'll talk about a bit more about how we are planning to do that. But as I get into it, I just want to share a little story about Africa and why I'm an incredibly bullish optimist about Africa and why I do get the opportunity to travel the world to talk about how the crowd, everybody in this room and more, is enabling African innovation. So again, during the course of this presentation, throughout the day, you've all been told about Peter Diamandis, who's one of the founders of Singularity University, where David is a member of the faculty. And he says, if you want to become a billionaire, help a billion. Now, for me, the story of Africa is about the next billion. Okay? We are fast moving into a space where, again, because of technology and through technology, we not only are enabling and uplifting many more Africans, but we're also leapfrogging and leading the way in multiple areas of innovation. And this is why. Okay? Because in Africa, the crowd is the one that does everything. Again, we've got this pretty much tied into our DNA. In South Africa, we call it Ubuntu. In South Africa, we use colloquial terms like, it takes a village to raise a child. Okay? So these things are fundamentally already part and parcel of how we look at the world. But the most exciting prospect for me about Africa is how we all have cell phones in our pockets and how we're figuring out ways in which to leverage the use of those mobile devices to help us leapfrog and drive new innovations for the world. It's how we're now really discovering that you can get on a plane and go somewhere else and go and change the situation and find new markets, especially in the developing world. And again, what was quite interesting, in the last week, there's been a stat that was released that said in the last 2 years alone, over 120 tech hubs have been launched in Africa. 120 tech hubs. Okay? I know in Cape Town we are very spoiled for choice. I mean, I've been part of this ecosystem for the past 8 years. So again, these things, they happen. You don't even feel them or even sense them. They just happen. Okay? But for the rest of the continent, you can imagine, and when I talk about the continent, I'm not talking about 54 states in Africa. To be honest, guys, I'm talking about the 14 urban cities that are driving the growth in this continent, and that will continue to drive the growth in this continent to effect the 54 states. And again, what's also equally fascinating about where we're going, I'm not sure if you saw recently that in Kigali there was a signing of 6 main presidents, but a signing by 40-odd African states for open trade borders over the course of the next 10 years. Okay? Couple this with open skies, couple this with Pan-African visas, suddenly the opportunity of Africa and the prospects for Africa look vastly different. And these are the things that we've looked at and we've thought about and we've applied to our thinking in ensuring that the next phase of future financing of early-stage companies happens through crowdfunding. But let's paint the picture. This is the status currently of venture capital. Nigeria is marginally in the lead, but South Africa, thanks to some of you in the room, is able to really kind of go along with the trend and in raising capital, and we continue to grow. In fact, SAFCA, this year's report has estimated an annualized growth in the venture capital space somewhere in the region of 180%. But what's more interesting for me is the fact that when you look at where the UK currently sits, 21% of all venture capital raised in the UK comes out of the equity crowdfunding space. Okay? Yes, there are tax incentives, there are various government programs, and this is why we're working on this. Earlier on, Kevin mentioned in his introduction that he is the founding president of the Africa Crowdfunding Association, and these are the things we're doing to drive advocacy and government adoption and legislation that supports the tax incentives as well as the growth of the industry. In South Africa, the picture looks marginally different, but again, the beauty of the story of South Africa, in fact, the wonderful story of the Western Cape, which I'm not sure many people in this audience are aware of, I'm sure maybe Philip might be aware of, but the reality of it is that Stellenbosch is one of the top 5 rated places for angel investing in the world. Don't know if you guys knew this. Okay? We compare very favorably to Tel Aviv, to New York, to San Francisco, from a perspective of enabling early stage investing. But again, what I've personally found in the past as a challenge with this is that, yes, in South Africa, it gets then structured into one kind of racial group. What we're going for is an open, collaborative enablement of early stage companies, okay? Where if you are SIPO, you have as equal an opportunity as Johannes to raise venture capital. Okay? And this is what equity crowdfunding fundamentally will begin to enable. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, in the past year, 2016, 2017, 21% of UK VC investment was raised through equity crowdfunding. And again, we want to see the same happen in South Africa. We specifically are looking at the market opportunity that exists in Africa, and we're benchmarking a kind of multitude of figures to kind of see where this growth will go. And it's already started. In fact, I think we're still 2 years behind the curve. Okay? And the reason why we're starting in South Africa initially is so that because of South Africa's banking, legislative, and legal frameworks, there's a lot we can learn in a formalized environment. Okay? To take those lessons and help other governments really begin to start applying these principles and seeing the growth. The slides will be available for everybody as well, I think, on the WhatsApp group. So what have we done? We've done something, I think, somewhere fairly straightforward, but it took us many workshops and conversations and very expensive discussions with our lawyers to eventually have a model that I think works for the country. And that model basically says, in a very simple kind of infographic, you've got willing entrepreneurs who are willing sellers of equity in their companies. You pair them up with willing buyers of that equity in the market. Those could be either advised or advance investors or angel investors. There could also be novice investors. So when you go into the uprise.africa website, you're able to take a very quick, there's no right or wrong answer kind of test to make sure that you are at least sober when you're doing the investment. And what we've built around that is an ecosystem of support based on really supporting the anchor product. This is through accelerator programs, through professional services like lawyers, accountants, videographers. And again, we give these entrepreneurs an opportunity in which to succeed. And I'm grateful today that I can officially announce, I think, Inga, that tomorrow one of those campaigns will be going live, and I close off with that particular slide. But in effect, and again, I'm happy to take questions around this later on this afternoon, the equity crowdfunding space in South Africa is very much alive and going strong. In terms of what we're trying to do fundamentally is that we are looking to democratize access to capital. Not only are we doing that by ourselves, we're having conversations with the banks, we're having conversations with DFIs, we're having conversations with anybody, in fact, who would want to listen and to take on board. And what we also recognize is that we have to educate the market around where this market opportunity is going and how is it that you can benefit from participating as well. We have some exciting initiatives that are coming up in our pipeline. Like I said, the plan is to have deals going live each month, and I'll be showing you the one that will be going live this month. We're also working on a television platform, which will drive that public education and public awareness context of it. We anticipate that over the course of the next couple of years, we'll be active in Africa. As of today, we're only taking deals exclusively from South African registered companies. Okay? But we're pretty sure fairly soon we'll be opening that up. And again, my experience of Africa, I can tell you, South Africa is pretty much an entrepreneurial bubble. The minute you start opening up the opportunities to the rest of the continent, you're going to see some seriously wonderful, innovative solutions. So I'm actually personally looking forward to opening up that opportunity to the rest of the continent. We are able to take local as well as international investment with terms and conditions for the international investors. It's not easy, it's not us doing it, but it's through the SARB and the legislative environment, but we support. Just like Scott and them have done with Wealth Migrate, we enable the support component for it to be at least a smooth process. And lastly, what we're projecting is that over the course of this year, 2018, we see a 40% projected success rate, and we're looking forward to potentially having about 48 deals go live over the course of the year on our platform. Now again, going live tomorrow is a very interesting deal. Some of the most profitable projects that go up in these equity crowdfunding platforms is a brewing company called Drifter, which is actually out of here at Cape Town in Woodstock. And again, we had the pleasure last night of testing some of the product and giving the guests some of it away. But Drifter is distributed locally. You're welcome already to go to the microsite to go and look at the opportunity, or including Uprise.Africa's website if you put a note on it tomorrow. But we'll also be doing a lot of engagement around this particular opportunity throughout April and going forward in May. Those are the contact details where you can reach us. So again, I'll be back later this afternoon, and I'll be here during the course of the session as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Drew. It's always a pleasure to listen to you and to see amazing companies that are really going to make a difference, and people in the crowd being able to get involved.
Yeah.
And so right now it's really a great time. I know Kim. Where's Kim? Did she just run out?
Kim?
I think she may have just ran out. But Kim has asked some of our wealth partners just to stand up and say a few words about their experience, essentially doing exactly what...
Can I contextualize that as well? I
Yeah.
think the wonderful thing about Wealth Migrate is that, whether consciously or unconsciously, what they've enabled people to do is, as a collective, as a crowd, as a community, to be able to afford an opportunity in which to invest in opportunities that would otherwise not have access to, both in the United States, in Australia, and hopefully pretty soon here in South Africa as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So great. So
Where's
I don't
Kim?
know. It seems like Kim has left the room. So I don't know which wealth partners were happy to talk. So we got Sean here, so Sean can start. Thank you, Sean.
Hi everybody, I'm Sean Quinn. I've been a wealth partner now for probably close on 2 years or just shy of that. Just a small story about what makes me excited about Wealth Migrate and being a wealth partner. Scott's presentation spoke about how to spot the future, and he spoke about personalization and being able to choose what you want to do invest in. And I've got 2 little daughters, 5 years old, and she's just turned 3, but she was an investor at the age of 2. So for my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old, they currently own a portion of a medical building, and they own a portion of a multi-family investment as well. And at the age of 2, I think it was 2 days before her birthday, I posted on the group to say my daughter just earned her first quarterly dividend, which she has no idea what that means, but by the age of 18 she'll have absolute financial freedom, and that's really what excites me about what we're doing here today, to be able to empower our kids for the future.
Great. Thanks so much, Sean. Who is next?
We were one of the early people to invest in Wealth Migrate. We were looking for quite a while to move our property investments beyond South Africa, and we were really getting nowhere. I must admit I was a bit suspicious at first. I think we all were. But we've got several things invested and they're going pretty well, thanks. And I'd really like to commend the platform, because one of our earlier investments was a property in Memphis. And it's all very well owning one property in Memphis, but if you haven't got a tenant, if there's maintenance problems, you know, it's not really a pension for you, but the platform and the medical buildings, which is a whole new scale up in quality, they really are a pleasure and the type of thing you can build an early retirement on, or a retirement anyway. And the platform is so revolutionary because when we bought the house, we had to have an American registered LLC to hold it in. And can you believe it? It costs about 30,000 Rand plus to pay just the accountants to do the tax returns for this. And so you can actually invest in these things without any of that compliance cost. And I really want to thank Wealth Migrate for putting this great product together. And it's so simple and easy and cost effective. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lynn.